Tu vas prendre le titre de
The anti-Balaka were lying in wait at camps scattered around the outskirts of Bangui. Shortly after we met the group in the city, our fixer came through and got us access to some of the camps. Everyone was wondering what they would do next. The first camp we went to was at an old school. Fighters lazed about, some armed, some stoned, many young. They were an irregular force, armed mostly with nothing but homemade weapons and machetes. Many wore gree-grees, lucky charms and talismans they believed made them invisible and bulletproof.
Many of these guys are really, really poor villagers whose villages were attacked and they fought their way to the capital. One guy told us he fought 200 kilometers to get here, and they're not ready to leave until the president is out of office.
The first fighter who could give us any answers about where the anti-Balaka stood was Commander Rambo. Surprisingly, he wasn't named after the movie character.
Bon, nous on ne peut pas à certaines dosages. S'il s'agit de certaines dosages, on ne peut pas venir dans ces conditions. Nous, nos problèmes, c'est pour que nos dosages partent avec ces mercenaires, c'est fini. On ne peut pas accepter de dosages. Jusqu'à présent, moi-même, je connais que nos dosages n'est pas président. Parce que depuis qu'il était venu, il y a les tueries, on train de tuer des gens par là, par-ci. On ne peut pas accepter que nos dosages comme président.
What do you think will happen in the future? Are you planning to attack soon?
Non, mais nous, on demande pour qu'il démissionne. S'il ne veut pas démissionner, on doit attaquer. On est prêt. On n'est pas dans une province, on n'est pas loin de Bangui. Là, on est prêt. On avait fait comment de venir ici. S'il ne veut pas quitter, il va quitter par la force.
NGOs had reported that there were up to 6,000 child soldiers in the conflict, and a lot of the fighters looked really, really young. One young man, who called himself B13, told us he was 15 but looked, well, 13.
Why are you a fighter now? You're 15 years old. Why have you chosen to fight? What about your parents? What do they think of you fighting right now?
The men in the camps had known very little peace since the arrival of the Seleka. They wanted things to go back to the way they were.
What was your life like before the Seleka came, when you were with your family, when you were in your village?
Par rapport à soit Seleka binga comment peut un peu beke tega mena yezo la comité gigit mebe affaire tu me que ça tembe wala mena sumi vivre na menga timi binga comment peut ça tembe wala konya pe donc on tozo Seleka guma famo on tozo Seleka guma famo inga comment peut du te ça ko to tia pe ngonzola gumbi simili geti tembi chassala kina ndutala ta ki ndutala mi kiri mi sara yeso la mi que sara mi avancer devant il tenti cordola sombi simili geti tene mi vondi tenti cordola timi.
For Angry Lion, his reasons for taking up arms was intensely personal. It wasn't just his livelihood the Seleka destroyed, it was his family.
What future do you hope to see for your son?
After hanging around this camp for a while, some of the higher-ups agreed to take us to another, more hidden camp. We hopped into a pickup truck with a bunch of fighters piling into the back and headed out, half wondering if they would make us safer or put us more at risk. A commander I affectionately named Bullethead agreed to escort us. We soon learned that the anti-Balaka weren't the most organized of forces.
Tu vas prendre le titre Oza vitazo.
Oto.
Oza vitazo. Lango ko. Oza vitazo na danger ngase. Ba la so. Na français gani mo pela ngati eh. Mo pela français ngati. Ma français. Konsi na doa. Aza mo gete mo bata population wala mo goti tene mo arme mo pani. Hein?
We just saw some irregular military justice. Apparently that guy was supposed to stand guard, and he saw us coming, he thought we were Celica, and he ran away and just dropped his barrier. So the commanders weren't too fond of that, and they taught him a lesson.
Shortly after we got underway again, we ran into another obstacle.
Slight problem with the bridge the Antabalaka just built for us. They had dug a trench over here to stop Celica trucks from going in. Threw a little bit of wood on it to get our truck over it. Didn't quite work so well, so we're thinking of plan B right now. So the conversation right now is that we're about to head to another base, and there's a lot of armed men there, a lot of guns, and they're worried that if we show up in this pickup truck with fighters in the back, they're going to think we're the enemy or the Celica or something, and bad things are going to happen. So they're sending a scout ahead to let them know that we're coming and that we're journalists and that it's friendly relations and not the enemy.
Every village we drove through, people took off running, terrified, thinking we were the Celica. Once they realized that we were the Antabalaka, we were met with cheers and applause. Once we arrived at the other camp, it took a bit of schmoozing, but the commander agreed to give us an interview.
We drove through the farmlands and people were cheering for the Antabalaka. Do you have a lot of support from the civilians here?
Je pensais population à que pour Yeso Isara parce que Yeso Celica Sara à la fakodroti. Anti-Balaka a que rébellion peu. Anti-Balaka a que Yeso révolution nationale a que rébellion peu. Beni so comme à la kanga legena i atena la ti désarmé i sara mbeto kete ngati kuti baye so la kasara que aka terroriste là aga à présent kanati République centrafricaine di lancer appel so na la ba tene watakala mbitene asara si la so opinion internationale na peuple centrafricain quoi vivre ni donc Yeso Sarah, comme opinion internationale, à mot devant, tu tenais à défendre Kodroni, mais na bangon de Timbi, à Niska, na Ishoso, à la arrivée de Sarah désarmement, tant que il est tapé.
What will you do when this is all over?
Mbike Kuta, mécanicien Mingi. Depuis le 24 mars jusqu'à l'assaut, Bissara Kwapa. Mais Mbiti, tu n'as pas, c'est Bissara Kwapa. Iso Igazo, Igazo Sifangoyaka, Akena Miloti. Yunji, Kwani, la Kodroti, Siri Akiri Dawa, Zokoko, Akiri Naisoro. À la fin, peuple centrafricain, à la violer, à Mouawali, partout. À la piller, partout. À que normal à pas. C'est pourquoi il sera en gonjo. Tu tenais, il tombe là, en dos Kodroti. Et il tombe là, ouais. Il wani. La force soit force française, soit Miska. Il n'a la quoi, il est aidé là. Il m'a beaucoup na la titane. Il sera désarmement tibangi.
Before we left, the commander had one last thing he wanted to say, an ominous warning for everyone in Bangui.
dernier message ti Timbiti Mouni, opinion internationale. Et puis moi là en témoin que a famille ti angbati lango dans d'autres pistes. A famille ti angbati lango dans église et il venir que souffrir na Ngunda. Il m'a 48 heures. 48 heures. Donc ngana lo démissionner il que sigi. Il que sigi et puis la duty responsable ni.
C'est le Tchadien qui veut tuer tout nous.
C'est eux qui viennent. C'est la Foma Tchadien.
Ici en Gobongo, il va tuer tout le monde ici. Le Foma Tchadien qui a fait ça. Le Foma Tchadien.